So take a look at this. This is a birthday cake for my daughter's birthday yesterday. These are my running shoes so I can work out. I want to do this. I need to do this. A couple videos ago, I made a video on what Jesus says about quarantine, and we looked at this time where Jesus was, in the desert for 40 days being tested. And there seems to be this connection between a time of isolation and a time of testing. And so I thought, let's go ahead and make a video on what Jesus says about temptation and how to fight temptation that maybe can be helpful for you and me as we, go through our own social isolation. But first I gotta work out here in my basement because, the gyms are closed. Last one. Okay. So, you might not agree with Jesus' idea of sin, and that's fine, but you do understand this idea of doing something you don't want to do, or not doing something you do want to do, and this idea of being tempted. For Jesus, he grew up reciting Jewish scriptures, and the scriptures talk about God leading us in paths of righteousness, or leading us in the way everlasting. And so this idea of temptation or sin is this idea of stepping away from what God wants. So that's what Jesus is talking about when he talks about temptation. And there's a couple concepts that we can actually apply here. First, I need to catch my breath, take a quick shower, and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, all done. So the night that Jesus is betrayed and arrested and all that kind of stuff, he's with his disciples in a garden. And he tells them, and he knows his arrest is coming, and so he tells them to watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. And here again, we see this idea that temptation leads us away from the paths of righteousness and the way of everlasting life. But what's so interesting is that he tells them to pray because the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And right here we see three things that we need to keep in mind when we're trying to fight temptation. And I've got a little demonstration here I'll do for you. So first, Jesus says that there is the power of your flesh. This is like your body or your flesh. That's not a bad thing in Jewish thought. Your flesh is a good thing, but your body was made by God. And your body was made with appetites, and those can be a good thing. Like you have the appetite to eat, that's a good thing. But the problem with your appetites is there's no regulator on them. When our appetites rule us, that's when things become destructive. And so suddenly a good appetite like eating or sex or sleep, all of a sudden we can be given into those things and we have no control over them. Basically your flesh is like Pac-Man. It's just like more and more and more and more. But then Jesus says there's also another power at work. It's your willpower. And this is what you want to do. This is your desires. But the problem is that your willpower is weaker than your flesh. And this is why you do things that you don't want to do and don't do things that you do want to do, because your willpower is less than your flesh's power. So Jesus' solution to this is to go ahead and pray. And at first this seems really simple, but now think about what's happening. When you pray, you're actively involving your body in doing something that you want to do. And so you're now channeling your flesh's power towards your willpower. And suddenly your willpower becomes greater than your flesh's power. But it's not just your effort. Jesus says that when you pray, you tap into God's power for what you want to do. And all of a sudden you have a power outside of yourself to do what you want to do. And so Jesus tells his disciples to pray, to ask for God's power to give their willpower over your flesh. And the same thing is true for you and I. When we're trying to fight temptation, pray and ask for God's power to give your willpower over your flesh. And remember, when you pray, to not just silently think your prayers, but to actually physically engage your body and move your lips and make a sound and say something like, God, give me strength to, and then fill in the blank for whatever it is that you need at that moment. And I get it. This is so easy to dismiss, but listen, if it worked for Jesus, then you might as well give it a try. And there's way more I could say, obviously, but that's what Jesus says about temptation. It's time to respond for yourself. How do you react to what Jesus says here? And then also, do you have anything that you do to help you fight temptation? Maybe it's accountability or journaling or whatever. What is it that you do to fight temptation? Go ahead and leave it in the comments below, and I'd love to see what you have to say there. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon. I earned it.